When the James Webb Telescope discovered the alien megastructure last month, the government tried to keep it secret, but secrets that big don't stay buried. I work at the observatory, and I saw the first images. A sprawling city world in the darkest part of space, built by something that existed before humanity, before dinosaurs, before complex life on Earth even began. The alien architecture was wrong in every way. Towers that grew like plants, streets that led into other dimensions, all constructed 13 billion years ago by the first ones, as we started calling them. Yesterday, everything changed. The telescope picked up a transmission from the ancient city, and when our computers decoded it, we found it was a message sent directly to Earth, to us, in every language humanity has ever spoken. The message was simple and terrible. Children of the late world, we built your DNA in our laboratories. We planted you on that blue world and waited for you to grow intelligent enough to find us. You have passed the test. We are coming to collect you now. Prepare for ascension. The transmission ended with coordinates, and when we checked them, they pointed to our solar system. Something vast is entering our space, and it will arrive in 30 days. My name is Owen Breckenridge, and I'm one of 3 data analysts at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore. I wasn't supposed to be on shift when the transmission came through. I was covering for Garrett, who'd called in sick for the 3rd time that week, probably nursing another hangover. The control room smelled like old electronics and someone's forgotten lunch. Just another Thursday until the alert system started screaming. Dr. Hammond burst through the door, his security badge still swinging from when he'd sprinted up 4 flights of stairs. The elevators were too slow for this. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. "Lock the door," he said. Not asked. Said. I did. He pulled up the raw data feed on the main display, hands shaking so badly he had to try twice. The translation algorithm had already processed the message, but he made me watch it decode again in real time. Every human language cycling through the screen. Ancient Sumerian, modern Mandarin, dead dialects that existed for maybe 2 generations before being swallowed by history, all saying the same thing. "This stays between us and the director," Hammond said. "For now." "For now" lasted about 6 hours. By midnight, 3 men in suits that cost more than my car had set up in the conference room. By morning, the institute was crawling with people who wouldn't tell us which agency they worked for. They confiscated our phones, our laptops, anything that could send a message to the outside world. But I'd already sent the files to myself, to an email account they didn't know about, using a terminal in the old equipment closet that no one remembers exists. I need to tell someone what I found in the data, what Hammond made me erase before the government showed up, because the transmission wasn't the only thing that came through the telescope yesterday. There was something else, something they don't want anyone to know about. They let me go home at 3 a.m, but only after I signed 17 pages of documentation that basically said I'd spend the rest of my life in a federal prison if I breathed a word about what I'd seen. The suit who handed me the pen had eyes like a dead fish. He watched me sign each page without blinking once. "Your phone," he said when I finished. "Already gave it to—" "Your personal phone, Mr. Breckenridge. The one in your jacket pocket." I handed it over. He dropped it into a metal case without looking at it. The parking lot was empty except for my Honda and 3 black SUVs that hadn't been there when my shift started. Baltimore's skyline glittered in the distance. All those people sleeping with no idea what was sliding through space toward them. 30 days, maybe less now. Time moved differently when you knew it was running out. I drove home on autopilot, watching my rearview mirror more than the road. My apartment in Fells Point was exactly as I'd left it. Dishes in the sink, laptop open on the coffee table to a half-finished report about spectral analysis. Normal things. A normal life that had ended the moment that transmission came through. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those coordinates. The thing entering our solar system wasn't showing up on any of our conventional telescopes yet, but the James Webb had caught something, a shadow where stars should be, a hole in space shaped like a hand reaching toward us. By 7 a.m, I gave up and made myself breakfast. The eggs tasted like cardboard. Everything did now. My work phone, the one they'd left me with, rang at 8:30. "Breckenridge, it's Vance. Dr. Peter Vance. one of the senior astrophysicists. We'd worked together for 3 years, mostly on mundane data about star formation. He'd always been steady, methodical. Now his voice had a razored edge to it. "Can you come to my place?" "Not the institute, my apartment." "They said we weren't supposed to..." "I know what they said. I'm asking anyway, please." He gave me an address in Mount Vernon, not far from the Walters Art Museum. Said to use the side entrance and not to let anyone see me come in. I shouldn't have gone. But isolation does strange things to your judgment, and I needed to talk to someone who'd actually seen what I'd seen. Vance's apartment was the 3rd floor of a renovated brownstone. He answered the door in clothes he'd clearly slept in, or tried to. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a smell coming off him. Not body odor exactly, but something sour and afraid. "You look like shit," I said. "Yeah, well..." He locked 3 separate deadbolts behind me. "You would too if you'd spent the last 4 hours going through the secondary data." "What secondary data?" He led me to his dining room, which he'd converted into something between a home office and a conspiracy theorist's wet dream. 3 monitors, cables everywhere, and pages of printouts covering every surface. Some of them had burn marks at the edges, like he'd tried to destroy them and changed his mind. "They took everything from the institute," Vance said, "but I'd already uploaded fragments to my personal cloud before Hammond made us scrub the servers. Encrypted, password protected. They didn't know to look for it." "Jesus Christ, Peter, if they find out..." "They're going to find out eventually. That's not what matters anymore." He pulled up a file on the center monitor. "Look at this. This came through right after the main transmission. Same frequency, same source. But the decryption algorithm flagged it as a separate message. Hammond deleted it before anyone else could see." The screen showed a string of numbers and symbols that hurt to pass, not because they were complicated, but because they felt wrong somehow, like looking at something through water. "It's another set of coordinates," Vance said, "not for where they're coming from, for where they want us to go." "What do you mean, where they want us to go?" "There's a structure. Here. On Earth." His finger stabbed at a location on the map he'd pulled up. "Mongolia. Middle of the Gobi Desert. These coordinates point to something 60 meters below the sand. Something that's been there for a very, very long time." "How do you know it's been there?" "Because I cross-referenced the geological surveys from the area. There's an electromagnetic signature that dates back at least 40,000 years. Maybe older. And here's the fucked up part." He zoomed in on a satellite image. "There's already activity there. Recent. Someone's been digging." I leaned closer to the screen. He was right. Fresh excavation marks scarred the desert surface, and there were temporary structures scattered around a central point. Vehicles. People. "Who?" I asked. "I don't know, but whoever they are, they got there fast. Like they knew exactly where to dig before the transmission even came through." Vance's hand was shaking as he minimized the window. Outside, a car door slammed. "You should go," he said. "If they see both of us together..." "Peter, what aren't you telling me?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled up one more image. A photograph, grainy and overexposed, taken through what looked like a cave entrance. Something waited in the darkness beyond. Something with too many angles and a surface that seemed to shift even in a still photograph. "That's what they're digging toward," Vance said quietly, "and I think it's been awake this whole time." The car door slammed again, closer now, footsteps on the stairs outside. "Back door," Vance hissed, "now." I went. I made it 3 blocks before I realized I was being followed. Not the obvious kind of tail, no black SUV creeping behind me at a consistent distance. This was subtler. A man in a grey jacket who happened to be at the same crosswalk. A woman with a grocery bag who turned down the same street. They were good, but they'd underestimated how paranoid 3 hours of federal interrogation could make a person. I ducked into the Senator Theatre on York Road, bought a ticket for whatever was playing, and slipped out the side exit while the previews rolled. Old spy movie bullshit, but it worked. By the time I made it back to my apartment, I was reasonably sure I'd lost them. My laptop sat where I'd left it. I pulled up the email account I'd created back in college, the one I'd used for exactly this kind of situation, though I'd never actually imagined needing it. The files I'd sent myself before the suits arrived were all there, encrypted and waiting. I spent the next 4 hours going through everything: the transmission, the coordinates, the spectral data that showed something massive displacing space as it moved toward us. But there was more, buried in the metadata that most people wouldn't think to check. The James Webb had been taking continuous observations of that region of space for the past 3 months. Not because anyone had requested it. The telescope had redirected itself, automatically, like it was following a signal we hadn't detected yet. I pulled up the observation logs and felt something cold settle in my gut. Every single image showed the same thing: that city world in the void, growing larger. Not because the telescope's resolution was improving, because it was getting closer. 13 billion light years away 1 month ago, 12 billion 3 weeks ago. Now, 8 billion, and dropping fast. The math didn't work. Nothing could cross that distance without violating every law of physics we understood, unless the first ones had found a way to fold space itself, treating the universe like paper they could crumple at will. My phone buzzed, not the work phone. That one sat dead on my counter. This was a text from a number I didn't recognize. They know you have the files. Burn everything and run, or meet me at the Greyhound station on Haynes Street, 10 p.m. Come alone. V. Vance. He'd gotten a burner phone somehow. I checked the time, 9:17 p.m. 43 minutes to decide whether I was going to flush my entire life down the toilet or pretend the last 24 hours hadn't happened. I was at the station by 9:55, carrying nothing but my wallet and the encrypted flash drive I'd copied the files onto. The place smelled like diesel fuel and industrial cleaner. A handful of travellers waited for late-night buses, most of them asleep on the plastic chairs or staring at their phones with the glazed expression of people who'd given up on their destinations mattering. Vance appeared from the men's bathroom at exactly 10 o'clock. He'd shaved his beard and wore a baseball cap pulled low, but I recognized the way he walked, shoulders hunched forward like he was perpetually leaning into a strong wind. "You're an idiot for coming," he said. "Yeah, well, you're an idiot for texting me." We sat in the back corner away from the security cameras. Vance pulled out a tablet and kept his voice low. "I found something else in the data. Something that explains why they're coming for us now, after all this time." He swiped through images, more of that strange architecture, the towers that grew instead of being built. The first ones didn't just create our DNA, they embedded something in it. A genetic marker that activates when a species reaches a certain threshold of technological development. What kind of marker? A beacon. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. We've been broadcasting our location and development level to them for the past 100 years. Every advancement we make, radio, satellites, the fucking internet, it all feeds into this signal. And when we launched the James Webb, when we looked deep enough into space to finally see them, that was the trigger. That told them we were ready. Ready for what? What's ascension supposed to mean? Vance's laugh had no humor in it. "You really want to know?" I translated more of the secondary transmission, the part Hammond deleted. He pulled up a text file. "They're not coming to elevate us. They're coming to harvest us. Our consciousness, our genetic material, everything that makes us human. They need it to sustain themselves. They're old, Owen. So goddamn old that they've started to decay. Their civilization is dying, has been dying for billions of years. We're the crop they planted, and now it's harvest time." I wanted to call him crazy, wanted to believe he'd snapped under the pressure and was seeing patterns that didn't exist. But the data on his tablet was real, the mathematics were solid, and somewhere above us, something vast was eating the distance between the stars. "The site in Mongolia," I said. "What's buried there?" "An archive. They left them scattered across the galaxy, preservation chambers filled with the genetic templates of every species they've created. There are probably hundreds of them, maybe thousands. We found ours by accident in 1947. Wait, 47? As in, Roswell wasn't a weather balloon, Owen. It was a probe that malfunctioned and crashed while trying to access the archive. The government recovered it, back-engineered what they could, and spent the next 70 years trying to dig deep enough to reach what was really there. They finally broke through last year, and whatever they found inside started waking up. He swiped to another image. This one showed the interior of what looked like a massive underground chamber. The walls were covered in something organic, pulsing with bioluminescence, and at the center. Not from fear exactly, but from recognition. Like seeing a photograph of yourself taken before you were born. The thing in the chamber was shaped vaguely like a human, but stretched and perfected in ways that made actual humans look like rough drafts. It floated in some kind of suspension fluid, and its eyes, Jesus Christ, it had too many eyes, were open. That's what we look like to them, Vance said quietly. A prototype. An early version they're coming back to upgrade or discard. A bus pulled into the station outside, its air brakes hissing. Passengers filed off, tired and rumpled. There's more, Vance said. The government's been in contact with something at the site. Not the first ones, at least not yet, but there are others. Beings that were left behind to maintain the archives. They've been teaching us their language, showing us their technology, and according to what I decrypted, they've offered us a deal. What kind of deal? Serve willingly when the first ones arrive, help them harvest the rest of humanity, and a select few of us get to survive, get to become something more than human. His hands were shaking again. The president's already agreed. They're going to announce it in 2 weeks, call it a first contact situation and a unique opportunity for human evolution. But it's just culling, Owen. They're going to sort us like cattle. I sat back, trying to process it all. 30 days until arrival, 2 weeks until announcement, and somewhere in the Gobi Desert, something was teaching our government how to betray our own species. Why tell me this? I asked. Because I need help. There's a way to shut it down. The archive, the signal, all of it. But I can't do it alone, and I sure as hell can't trust anyone in an official capacity. He looked at me with desperate intensity. You still have access to the Institute's systems, right? Your credentials haven't been revoked yet? I don't know, maybe. Why? Because we need to send our own message. Not to the first ones. It's too late to stop them. But to everyone else. Every observatory, every radio telescope, every amateur astronomer with a dish in their backyard. If enough people know what's coming, if enough people see the proof, they can't just quietly hand us over. A security guard walked past, eyes scanning the terminal. Vance tensed, but the guard kept moving. There's something else, Vance said. Something I need to show you in person. Files that are too dangerous to keep in digital format. He pulled out a key. Storage unit. Greenmount Industrial Park, Unit 347. Everything I've compiled is there, the full translation, the government communications with the archive maintainers, even some hardware I acquired. If anything happens to me, you need to get it all out. Peter, what are you planning? Insurance, he said. But his smile was the kind that usually preceded suicide missions. My work phone, still in my apartment, was probably ringing. Men in suits were probably already tearing through my things, looking for evidence of what I'd copied. When? I asked. Tomorrow night. Midnight. I'll send you final coordinates. He stood up, adjusting his cap. And Owen, don't go home. They're already there. He walked out into the Baltimore night before I could ask him how he knew. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching buses come and go, trying to figure out how my life had collapsed so completely in less than 48 hours. Through the grimy window, I could see stars. They looked different now, less like distant suns and more like watching eyes. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. We know where you are. We know what you have. This is your only chance to cooperate. Call this number in the next hour or face consequences. I dropped the phone in a trash can on my way out and started walking toward Greenmount, toward whatever Vance had hidden in that storage unit. 28 days until arrival. The countdown felt generous. Greenmount Industrial Park was the kind of place you went to store things you wanted to forget. Rows of identical orange doors, security lights that flickered more than they illuminated, and a fence that had been cut through so many times the owners had stopped bothering to repair it. I reached Unit 347 at 11:30 p.m. using the key Vance had given me. The lock clicked open. The smell hit me first, ozone and something else. Something biological that had been sealed in darkness too long. I pulled out my phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The unit was 10 by 10, crammed with equipment that looked like it had been stolen from 3 different government agencies. Computer towers with their serial numbers filed off, satellite uplinks, hard drives stacked in milk crates, and covering the walls, photographs, hundreds of them, connected by red string like someone's demented art project. But these weren't crime scene photos. These were images from the Gobi site. I moved closer, studying them in sequence. The excavation had started small, just a few researchers and some ground-penetrating radar. Then more people arrived, then military vehicles, then structures that looked less like archaeological dig sites and more like biosecurity containment facilities. One photograph showed workers in hazmat suits standing around something they'd pulled from the sand. A door. Not stone or metal, but something that looked grown. Organic edges, spiral patterns that seemed to move even in a still image. Another photo showed what was inside. The chamber Vance had shown me, but from a different angle. And there wasn't just one of those floating figures. There were dozens of them, arranged in concentric circles like some kind of choir. All of them suspended in that strange fluid. All of them with their eyes open. I pulled out my phone to photograph the evidence, but the screen glitched the moment I tried. The camera app opened and immediately crashed. When it opened again, the image it showed wasn't the room in front of me, it was somewhere else. A vast space filled with geometric shapes that my brain couldn't quite process. And in the center, turning toward the camera. The phone went dead in my hand, completely dead, not just powered off. The battery had been at 60% 2 minutes ago. Shit, I muttered, a noise outside. Footsteps on gravel, multiple people moving with tactical precision. I killed the flashlight and pressed myself against the wall. Through the crack in the door, I counted 4 figures approaching. They weren't police. Wrong gear, wrong movement pattern. Private security, maybe, or something worse. They bypassed my unit and stopped 3 doors down. I heard metal screech as they forced open Unit 350. Voices, muffled. Then someone screamed, high and sudden and cut off way too fast. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed as many hard drives as I could fit in my jacket and slipped out the back, staying low. The industrial park backed onto an abandoned rail line, and I followed it north toward the old mill district, moving fast. My lungs burned. I hadn't run this hard since high school, and my body was making sure I remembered that. But I didn't stop until I reached the Clipper Mill complex, where I finally allowed myself to catch my breath behind a dumpster that smelled like rotting vegetables and diesel. That's when my dead phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible. The thing didn't even have a battery indicator anymore, but it was vibrating, insistent, and when I pulled it out, the screen showed one message in white text on black. Come to the archive, bring the drives, or Vance dies screaming. The text disappeared. The phone died again, permanently this time. I should have run, should have buried the drives somewhere and disappeared into the general population. But Vance had risked everything to show me the truth, and I couldn't just let him. My thoughts scattered as something moved in the shadows across the rail line. At first I thought it was a person, maybe one of those security goons who'd found my trail. But the proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin. And it moved in a way that made my hindbrain scream warnings that my conscious mind couldn't articulate. It stepped into the light from a nearby street lamp, and I understood why the photographs had seemed so wrong. The maintainer, because it couldn't be anything else, looked almost human. Almost. Like someone had been given a detailed description of human anatomy, but had never actually seen a person. Its skin was the color of deep-sea creatures, translucent enough that I could see things moving beneath. Not organs, machinery. Biological machinery that pulsed with a rhythm that had nothing to do with heartbeats. Its face had all the right features in all the wrong configurations. Eyes that tracked independently. A mouth that split horizontal instead of vertical when it opened. Owen Breckenridge, it said. Not in English, not in any language I recognized. But I understood it anyway. the words bypassing my ears and appearing directly in my thoughts. "You have pieces of the archive. We require their return." I backed away slowly. "Where's Vance?" "Dr. Vance is being prepared. He volunteered certain information in exchange for consideration. You should do the same." It moved closer, and I realized it wasn't walking. Its feet didn't quite touch the ground. "The first ones arrive in 26 days. Your species has a choice. Integrate willingly or be processed as raw material. Dr. Vance chose integration. You can make the same choice." "What does that mean? Integration?" The maintainer's head tilted at an angle that would have broken a human neck. "You will be improved." "Perfected. Your genetic code contains flaws that cause aging, disease, death. These will be corrected. You will become closer to what the first ones intended when they designed you." "We're not a fucking design," I said. "We evolved." "No." It moved closer and the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. My breath came out in frost clouds. "You were planted. Your evolution was guided. Every major advancement in your species' history occurred because we adjusted your genetic markers, written language, tool use, abstract thought, all gifts given at precisely calculated intervals." The hard drives in my jacket suddenly felt heavier. Vance had known this. He'd found proof, and instead of running, he'd tried to bargain with them. "I want to see him," I said. "That can be arranged. But first, the drives." I pulled them out slowly, weighing my options. There weren't many. If I ran, this thing would catch me. I had no illusions about that. If I fought, well, I'd seen what it looked like under that skin. It wasn't flesh I could hurt. "These are encrypted," I said. "I need Vance's passwords to access most of them." The maintainer's mouth split wider. Was that supposed to be a smile? "Dr. Vance no longer has passwords. Dr. Vance has been optimized. He will provide access." It reached out one hand. The fingers were too long, and there were too many joints in each one. I placed the drives in its palm. "Follow," it said. We walked back toward Greenmount, but not to the storage unit. The maintainer led me to an access road I'd never noticed before, one that seemed to appear only when approached from a specific angle. There was a van waiting, no windows, engine running. "Inside," the maintainer said. The interior was empty except for Vance. He sat in the corner, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around them. He looked up when I climbed in, and I knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. His eyes had taken on that same quality as the maintainer's, focused and unfocused simultaneously, like he was watching me and something infinitely distant at the same time. "Owen," he said. His voice sounded normal but wrong, like an actor reading lines they didn't quite understand. "I tried to warn you. Should have been clearer." "Peter, what did they do to you?" "Made me better. I can see now. Really see. The first ones aren't coming to harm us. They're coming to elevate us, to fix what's broken in our design." He stood up, and I realized he wasn't quite touching the floor either. "You should let them help you too. The pain is temporary, the clarity is forever." The van door slammed shut behind me. The maintainer climbed into the driver's seat, a sight so absurd and horrible that I almost laughed. Almost. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the Baltimore node," Vance said. He was smiling now, and there were too many teeth in that smile. "There are archives on every continent, smaller ones but functional. They need to verify what I found, and they need to confirm you understand the situation. Which is, you can join us willingly, or they'll extract what they need from you and discard the rest. It's not personal, Owen, it's just efficiency. The first ones value efficiency above all else." The van started moving. I couldn't see out, there were no windows, but I felt us descending. Not down a ramp, but down in a way that made my inner ear scream, like we were falling through layers of reality. Vance talked the entire time, explaining in perfect clinical detail what the integration process involved, how they would peel back my consciousness layer by layer, how they would map my neural patterns and copy them into something more durable, how the human body was just a temporary shell and I should be grateful to transcend it. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the one hard drive I'd kept, the one I'd slipped into my sock while pulling out the others, betting that the maintainer would be too alien to understand human deception. That drive contained something Vance had mentioned in passing, a signal frequency that could disrupt the archive's connection to the first ones. A kill switch, essentially. He'd been planning to broadcast it through the Institute's radio telescope array before they'd gotten to him. The van stopped. The door opened onto a tunnel that looked like it had been carved by something with no concept of right angles. The walls were that same organic material from the photos, pulsing with dim bioluminescence. "This way," the maintainer said. I followed Vance deeper into the Baltimore node, into a network of chambers that shouldn't exist beneath the city. Other maintainers moved through the corridors, attending to equipment that looked equal parts biological and technological. And at the center of it all, the same suspension chambers from Mongolia. Smaller, fewer, but containing the same floating figures. Waiting, watching. One of them turned its many eyes toward me, and I realized, with sick certainty, that Vance had become a liar. Not intentionally, not consciously, but whatever they'd done to integrate him had reprogrammed his fundamental priorities. He'd brought me here not to help me, but to help them. I was livestock being led to slaughter by the first steer who'd learned to love the knife. "The integration process is painless," Vance said, guiding me toward an empty chamber. "You'll feel pressure, then nothing, then everything. And when you wake up, you'll understand why this is necessary, why the first ones are saving us from ourselves." The chamber opened like a mouth. I looked at Vance, really looked at him, and saw nothing of my colleague remaining. Just a thing wearing his shape, speaking his memories, convinced it was still human. "Peter," I said quietly, "I'm sorry." I drove my knee into his stomach with everything I had. He went down hard, surprise more than pain crossing his face. The maintainer moved toward me, but I was already running, back up the tunnel, praying I remembered the path out. Behind me, something that had been Vance started screaming. Not in pain, in rage, in betrayal. His voice mixed with the maintainer's, both of them calling my name in a harmony that made my skull ache. I reached the van. The keys were still in the ignition, small mercy. I threw it in reverse and gunned it, not caring about the grinding sounds or the way reality seemed to stretch and compress as I ascended back to actual Baltimore. I broke through into the surface streets going 60, sideswiped a parked car and kept driving. 26 days until the first ones arrived, and my best friend was gone, replaced by something that thought it was saving the world. I ditched the van in Patterson Park and spent the next 6 hours walking in circles through East Baltimore, trying to make sure nothing was following me. By dawn, I was reasonably certain I'd lost them, or they'd decided to let me run, which was somehow worse. The hard drive in my sock had left a blister on my ankle. Small price for what might be humanity's last chance. I needed somewhere to access the data, somewhere off-grid, somewhere the maintainers wouldn't think to look. I found it in a 24-hour internet cafe in Highlandtown, the kind of place where nobody asked questions as long as you paid in cash. The owner barely glanced at me when I handed over $20 for 2 hours of computer time. The drive took 3 attempts to decrypt. Vance had protected it with multiple layers of encryption, and I'd watched him type the passwords enough times to guess at the patterns. When it finally opened, I understood why he'd been so paranoid. The files weren't just data, they were a complete communication log between the maintainers and someone inside the government, someone with clearance high enough to make decisions about the entire species. I scrolled through months of correspondence, watching the deal take shape. The maintainers had made first contact in 2019, emerging from the Gobi archive after we'd finally dug deep enough. They'd offered technology, longevity, transcendence. All we had to do was cooperate when the first ones arrived. But there was a section Vance had highlighted in red, marked with 3 question marks. It was a message from the maintainers explaining what ascension actually meant. Not the sanitized version they'd given the government, but the technical specifications. The first ones didn't need our bodies. They needed our quantum consciousness signatures, the unique pattern of neural firing that made each human an individual. They would extract these signatures, compress them into data, and integrate them into their own dying civilization. We wouldn't die exactly. We'd become computational substrate, fuel, processing power for minds so vast they'd forgotten what it meant to think small. And the volunteers, people like Vance, who'd been integrated, weren't being saved. They were being converted into nodes, biological routers that would help coordinate the harvest when it began. The maintainers had done this on 1,000 worlds before Earth. They'd perfected the process. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The cafe owner glanced at me but said nothing. I kept reading. There was more. So much more. The James Webb hadn't redirected itself. The maintainers had hacked it, using code they'd planted in our satellite networks years ago. They'd wanted us to see the city world approaching, wanted us to feel small and awed and ready to submit. But Vance had found something else, a technical schematic buried in the maintainer's own communications. The archives weren't just storage facilities, they were broadcasting stations, sending a constant signal to the first ones. Location beacons, progress reports, and most importantly, a carrier wave that kept the first one's consciousness anchored across the impossible distance they were traveling. Disrupt that signal and the first ones would lose their way. They'd still be coming, but they'd be scattered, confused, vulnerable. The kill switch wasn't a weapon, it was a navigation jammer. Vance's notes included specific frequencies and a transmission protocol. He'd been planning to broadcast it through the Institute's radio array, but that was impossible now. I'd need something bigger, something with enough power to reach not just the Baltimore node, but all the archives simultaneously. I pulled up a map and started marking known radio telescope locations. Green Bank in West Virginia, Arecibo in Puerto Rico. No, that had collapsed. The Very Large Array in New Mexico, Goldstone in California. None of them would work. The government had probably locked them down the moment the transmission came through. I'd never get close. Then I remembered something Dr. Hammond had mentioned once, drunk at a Christmas party, a project he'd consulted on back in 2018. An amateur radio array built by a tech billionaire who'd gotten obsessed with SETI. Private funding, private property, somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. I searched for 20 minutes before finding it. The Kessler Observatory, near Spruce Knob in West Virginia. 40-dish array, built by Thomas Kessler before his death in 2022. His estate had kept it operational, mostly automated, maintained by a skeleton crew. It was a 3-hour drive. I'd need a car. I was halfway through planning the theft when someone sat down next to me, a man, early 60s, wearing an Orioles jacket and carrying a thermos that smelled like bourbon. "You're Owen Breckinridge," he said. Not a question. I tensed, ready to run again. "Relax, I'm not with them." He pulled out a badge. FBI, but old. The photo showed him 20 years younger. Retired. Name's Jack Byrne. I've been tracking the Gobi site for the last 15 years, ever since a friend of mine disappeared investigating it. "How did you find me?" "I've been monitoring chatter related to the James Webb discovery. Your name came up in some encrypted communications that got sloppy. Figured you were either dead or running. Glad it's the latter." He glanced at my screen. "Kessler Observatory, good choice. Remote, powerful, and the crew are conspiracy nuts who don't trust the government. They might actually help you." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I tried to warn people about the archives for years. Nobody listened. They called me paranoid, forced me into retirement, made sure I'd never work in law enforcement again." His hand shook slightly as he sipped from the thermos. "Then last month the transmission came through and I realized I'd been right all along. Felt pretty goddamn hollow." He slid a key across the table. "My truck. 2015 Silverado, parked 2 blocks north. Registration's in the glove box if you get pulled over. Consider it a loan." "I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will. Because someone needs to do something about this. And you're the only person I've found who actually has the tools to try." He stood up. "One more thing. The maintainers can track electronic signals. That drive you're using. Ditch it after you transfer the files. And your phone, even if it's dead, ditch it. They use quantum entanglement to tag devices. Sounds like science fiction, but hell, so did everything else until 3 days ago." He walked out before I could thank him. I transferred Vance's files to a cloud server using a disposable email, then physically destroyed the hard drive in the cafe's bathroom, smashed it with the toilet tank lid until it was just fragments of circuit board and twisted metal. The phone went into a storm drain on my way to Burns' truck. The Silverado was where he said it'd be, keys under the driver's mat. I was on I-70 West within 20 minutes, watching Baltimore disappear in the rearview mirror. The drive gave me time to think, time to realize how badly this could go wrong. Even if I reached the observatory, even if I convinced them to help, even if I successfully broadcast the jamming signal, what then? The maintainers would know immediately. They'd come for me. And there were nodes in every major city, probably hundreds of integrated humans by now, maybe thousands. I'd be painting a target on my back that I could never erase. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was letting the first ones arrive unimpeded, letting them harvest 7 billion people who'd never even been told they were crops. The sun rose over the mountains as I crossed into West Virginia. 24 days left, maybe less. The first ones were moving faster than anyone predicted, folding space in ways that made our physicists weep. My hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel too hard. I forced myself to relax, to breathe, to focus on the road ahead. The radio crackled with morning news. Nothing about alien transmissions or government conspiracies, just traffic reports and weather and someone arguing about football. Normal life, continuing because nobody knew it was ending. I turned it off. Somewhere behind me, the maintainers were mobilizing. Vance would tell them everything I knew, everything I planned. He'd do it willingly, convinced he was helping me see reason. Somewhere above me, the first ones were crossing distances that shouldn't be crossable, reality bending around them like tissue paper. And somewhere ahead in the West Virginia mountains was my last chance to throw sand in the gears of a machine that had been running for 13 billion years. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The Kessler Observatory sat on a ridge above the tree line, 40 white dishes pointed at the sky like flowers tracking a sun they couldn't see. The access road was gated, but the lock was rusted through. I parked and walked the last half mile, watching for security cameras. The main building was small, just a control room and living quarters for the crew. One truck in the parking lot, lights on in the window. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. I need help. It's about the James Webb transmission. The door opened a crack. A man peered out, maybe 30 years old, with the paranoid eyes of someone who'd spent too long alone with the stars. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "I know. But I have data about the transmission, about what's really coming. If you're monitoring deep space signals, you've probably picked up anomalies in the last 48 hours. Things that don't match any known sources." His expression shifted. Suspicion mixed with curiosity. "How do you know about that?" "Because I helped decode the original message. And because I have a way to stop them. But I need your array." He studied me for a long moment, then he opened the door wider. "You'd better come in, and you'd better not be bullshitting me." His name was Elliot Desmond, and he'd been running the observatory solo for the last 8 months. He showed me the anomalous signals he'd detected, strange harmonics underlying every deep space observation, patterns that repeated across multiple frequencies. "I thought it was equipment malfunction," he said, "but it's too consistent, too organized." I showed him Vance's files, explained the archives, the maintainers, the harvest. He listened without interrupting, which was either a good sign or meant he thought I was completely insane. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said, "let's say I believe you. Let's say this jamming signal actually works. What happens when you broadcast it?" "They'll know where I am. They'll come for me, for us." "How long do we have to set it up?" "Maybe 6 hours if we're lucky. After that." I shrugged. "However long it takes them to get here?" Elliot looked at the array through the window, at 40 dishes that could reach across space itself. "My grandfather built this place because he believed we weren't alone," he said quietly. "He died thinking he'd wasted his life and fortune on a dream. If this works, if we actually stop them, it'll mean he was right all along." He stood up and held out his hand. Let's get started. Setting up the jamming signal took 4 hours. Elliot moved through the equipment with practiced efficiency, rewiring the array's transmission protocols while I fed him the frequency data from Vance's files. The control room smelled like solder and old coffee, and outside the window those 40 dishes began to rotate in unison, tracking coordinates that pointed toward nothing visible. "This is insane," Elliot said, but he kept working. His hands were steady despite everything I'd told him. "If this works, we'll be disrupting a signal that's been broadcasting for God knows how long. The backlash could fry every dish in the array." "I know. And if it doesn't work, we'll have announced our location to things that want to liquefy our consciousness." "Yeah," he laughed, sharp and humorless. "At least it's not boring." We worked in silence for another hour. At some point, Elliot rolled up his sleeves and I noticed scars on his forearms, thin, deliberate lines that had healed years ago. He caught me looking. "College," he said, "before I found this place. Before I had something to do that mattered." He turned back to the equipment. "Funny how the end of the world gives you perspective." "Is that what you think this is? The end?" "Isn't it?" He paused, hands hovering over the keyboard. "Even if we stop them, even if we scatter them across space, they know we're here now. They know we figured out we're livestock. You think they'll just give up?" "No, but buying time is better than rolling over." Elliot smiled at that, actually smiled. "My grandfather would have liked you." Stubborn bastard energy. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. We'd known each other for 4 hours, and somehow, in the shadow of extinction, connection felt easier, more urgent, like there was no point in pretending we weren't all desperate for anything resembling human warmth. "When this is over," I started. "Don't," Elliot said quietly. "Don't do the when this is over thing. Just stay here, in this moment. It's better." He was right. The future was 23 days of dwindling hope and a harvest we probably couldn't stop. But here, now, in this control room with someone who understood what we were facing, this was real. I reached out and squeezed his shoulder. He covered my hand with his just for a second. Then the equipment beeped, and the moment broke. "We're ready," Elliot said. "The signal's primed. Once I hit transmit, it'll broadcast continuously for 6 hours. That should be enough to disrupt every archive simultaneously." "Should be?" "I'm working with alien technical specifications decoded by a man who got integrated into a hive mind. Forgive me for not being 100% confident." "Fair point." I pulled up the monitoring software, watching the power levels climb. The array was drawing more electricity than it was rated for, and somewhere in the building's guts, I could hear transformers humming with strain. "Here we go," Elliot said. His finger hovered over the enter key. "Any last words?" "Yeah, fuck the first ones." He grinned and pressed the key. The dishes tilted in perfect synchronization, angling toward a point in space that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on it. The transmission began, a carrier wave modulated with the exact inverse frequency of the archive signal. If Vance's calculations were correct, the two waves would create destructive interference. The navigation beacon would collapse. The first ones would lose their way. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the monitors started glitching, not malfunctioning, changing. The data feeds showed something impossible. The signal wasn't just reaching the archives, it was propagating backward through space-time, unfolding through dimensions we didn't have names for. "Holy shit," Elliot whispered. "It's working." "Look at the quantum resonance feedback." The numbers were climbing, the archives were receiving the signal, and their responses were garbled, confused. The carrier wave was destabilizing. That's when the lights went out, not just in the control room, everywhere. Every electrical system in the building died simultaneously, including backup generators. But the array kept broadcasting, powered by something that wasn't electricity anymore. The dishes glowed with a sick, greenish luminescence like bioluminescent algae in deep ocean water. "That's not supposed to happen," Elliot said. The door to the control room opened. I spun around, expecting maintainers. It was Jack Byrne, the retired FBI agent who'd given me his truck. "You need to stop the transmission," he said. His voice was different, flatter, like someone reading a script. "Jack, how did you—" "Stop the transmission, Owen. You're making a mistake." He stepped into the room and I saw his eyes, that same split focus Vance had, watching me and something infinitely distant. "No," I breathed. "When?" "This morning, after I gave you the truck." He moved closer and his smile was all wrong. "I wanted to help, to be part of the solution. The maintainers showed me what integration means. It's not death, Owen. It's evolution." Elliot grabbed a heavy flashlight from the desk. "Stay back. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you understand." Burns' head tilted at that impossible angle. "The jamming signal won't stop them. It will only anger them. Make the harvest more painful. But if you stop now, if you come with me willingly, I can arrange for both of you to be integrated. You'll become part of something greater." "He followed me," I said, mostly to myself. "You used me to find the observatory." "Of course." The maintainers needed to know where the broadcast would originate, needed to prepare countermeasures. Byrne gestured at the glowing dishes outside. "Your signal is already being absorbed, converted. In 20 minutes, it will reverse polarity and become a homing beacon. The first ones will arrive not in 23 days, but in 7. "You're lying. Check the data." Elliot pulled up the frequency analysis. His face went pale. "Fuck, he's right. Something's hijacking the signal, twisting it. If we don't shut down in the next 15 minutes, we'll accelerate their arrival." "Then shut it down," I said. "I can't." "Look." He pointed at the control systems. Every shutdown command returned an error. Every manual override was locked. "Whatever's powering the array now, it's not responding to our commands anymore." Burns smiled that horrible smile. "The archives learned from your signal. Adapted. That's what the first ones do. They evolve. They've been playing this game for billions of years. Did you really think you'd outsmart them with a few hours of preparation?" Rage and desperation mixed into something chemical in my blood. I grabbed Elliot's flashlight and swung it at Byrne. He didn't dodge, didn't even flinch. The metal connected with his skull with a sound like hitting wet clay. He staggered but didn't fall. "Violence is inefficient," Byrne said. Black fluid leaked from the wound, thick and moving wrong. "But if necessary, I can defend myself." His jaw unhinged. Something mechanical and organic emerged from his throat, clicking like insect legs. "Out!" Elliot shouted. "We need to blow the transformers, cut physical power to the building." We ran. Down the hallway, Byrne following with that horrible clicking sound echoing from his chest. The building's emergency lighting had kicked in, battery-powered, casting everything in red. The transformer room was in the basement. Elliot grabbed a fire axe from the wall mount as we descended. Behind us, Byrne's footsteps were steady, unhurried. He knew we were trapped. "If we kill the transformers, will that stop the array?" I asked. "I don't know, maybe. The dishes are powered by something else now, but cutting the building's power might disrupt whatever's controlling them." The basement was cramped and hot, dominated by 2 industrial transformers that thrummed with lethal voltage. Elliot handed me the axe. "Aim for the insulation. One good hit should cause a cascade failure, but you'll need to ground yourself first or—" Byrne appeared at the top of the stairs. "There's no time," I said. I raised the axe. "Owen, wait." I swung with everything I had. The blade bit deep into the transformer's housing, and for a split second, nothing happened. Then the world became light and pain and the smell of burning hair. I was on my back, ears ringing, vision swimming. Elliot was pulling me away from the transformer, which was now a fountain of sparks and melted metal. The lights died completely, the humming stopped, and outside, through the basement's high windows, I saw the array dishes go dark. "Did it work?" I managed to croak. "I don't know. We need to check the—" Elliot's words cut off as Byrne's hand closed around his throat. The integrated agent had moved silently in the darkness. He lifted Elliot like he weighed nothing, slamming him against the concrete wall. "Inefficient," Byrne repeated. "You've damaged valuable equipment." Delayed integration of useful assets. This will be noted. I tried to stand, my legs wouldn't cooperate. The electrical shock had done something to my nervous system. Everything felt distant and wrong. Elliot clawed at Burns' grip, face going purple. That thing in Burns' throat clicked faster, excited. I saw the axe. 3 feet away, blade still hot from the transformer. I crawled. Every movement sent fresh pain through my body, but I kept crawling. Burns saw me, started to turn, but he was still holding Elliot, and that moment of divided attention was enough. I grabbed the axe handle, swung upward, caught Burn under the chin with the blunt end. The impact shattered something inside him. His grip on Elliot released and both of them collapsed. Black fluid pooled on the concrete, spreading in patterns that looked almost deliberate. "Elliot," I gasped. "Elliot, talk to me." He coughed, wheezed, rolled onto his side and vomited. But he was breathing. He was alive. Burn wasn't moving anymore. Whatever he'd become was leaking out through cracks in his skin, leaving behind a husk that barely looked human. "The array," Elliot croaked. "Need to check if..." We helped each other up the stairs. Every step was agony. My hands were blistered from the electrical burn, and Elliot's throat was already bruising purple. The control room was dark, no power, no monitors. We couldn't verify if we'd stopped the transmission or made everything worse. "Backup generator," Elliot said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Storage shed, outside." We staggered into the dawn light. The dishes were motionless now, just metal pointing at an indifferent sky. No more glowing, no more transmission. The backup generator took 3 tries to start. When the control room systems finally booted up, we saw the damage. The signal had broadcast for 47 minutes before we'd killed it. 47 minutes of jamming that had been converted into something else. The first one's arrival was now calculated at 6 days, 16 hours. We'd accelerated the harvest by more than 2 weeks. "Shit," I said. Elliot sat down hard, head in his hands. "We fucked up. We thought we were jamming them, but we were just ringing the dinner bell louder." I wanted to argue, wanted to say we'd had no choice, that doing nothing would have been worse. But looking at the numbers, at how badly our one shot had backfired, the words wouldn't come. Outside in the growing light, I could see Burns' truck, the vehicle he'd used to follow me here, to infiltrate, to turn our resistance into a trap. My phone, or what was left of it, sat in a storm drain in Baltimore. My apartment was probably crawling with government agents. Vance was integrated. Burn was dead, but had never really been Burn anymore. And the first ones were coming so much faster now. I had 6 days to figure out what the hell to do next. Elliot looked at me with hollow eyes. "What now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But we can't stay here. They know about this place now. More of them will come. More maintainers, or more integrated humans, or something worse." I pulled up the satellite feeds, checking for activity. Nothing yet, but that wouldn't last. We need to move, get somewhere they can't predict. "There is nowhere they can't predict, Owen. They designed us. They know how we think." Maybe he was right. Maybe we were just programmed to fail, genetic code written to guarantee our eventual surrender, but I wasn't ready to believe that yet. "Pack whatever we can carry," I said. "We're leaving in 10 minutes. Elliot nodded slowly. Then he grabbed my hand, just for a moment, pressure and warmth and the desperate contact of 2 people who'd survived something impossible together. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad you knocked on my door." "Yeah," I said, "me too." We both knew it was probably the last honest connection either of us would ever make. We drove south through West Virginia on back roads, avoiding highways where cameras could track us. Elliot knew the mountains, knew which towns had been abandoned when coal died, and which gas stations still took cash without asking questions. By afternoon, we'd made it to an old hunting cabin near Seneca Rocks, property of a friend who'd died 3 years ago and whose estate had never been settled. "No one comes here anymore," Elliot said, unlocking the door with a key he kept on a chain around his neck. "Power's out, but there's a well and a generator." The cabin was one room with a loft, smelling like mouse droppings and old wood smoke. Better than nothing. We'd grabbed what we could from the observatory, Elliot's laptop, some hard drives, the frequency data. Not enough to stop what was coming, but maybe enough to understand it better. I sat on the sagging couch while Elliot got the generator running. My hands were still blistered from the transformer, wrapped in gauze we'd bought at a gas station along with beef jerky and energy drinks. Everything ached. Everything felt wrong. "Tell me about your family," Elliot said suddenly. He'd settled into the chair across from me, laptop open but not looking at it. "Before all this, did you have anyone?" "Had a brother," I said. The words came out rougher than expected. "Daniel. He was 2 years older, smart as hell, worked in particle physics at CERN. He died in 2021. Aneurysm, just gone. No warning." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." I stared at my bandaged hands. "After he died, I kind of threw myself into work. Figured if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't have to think about how much I missed him. My parents wanted me to come home, process it properly, but I just couldn't. Moved to Baltimore, took the job at the institute, stopped returning calls." "That why you're so determined to do this? To stop them?" "Maybe. I don't know. Daniel used to say the universe was fundamentally indifferent to human suffering, but that just meant we had to care about each other more. Make meaning where none existed." I laughed bitterly. "Turns out the universe isn't indifferent, it's actively hostile. We're cattle that got delusions of grandeur." Elliot was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your brother sounds like he would have fought anyway. Indifference or hostility doesn't matter. The fighting is what makes us human." "You sound like him." "Good." We sat in silence, listening to the generator hum. Outside, the forest was green and alive, and completely unaware that it would be gone in 6 days. Everything would be gone. Mountains, trees, every living thing on Earth converted into processing substrate for minds we couldn't begin to comprehend. My encrypted email account pinged. I'd set it to check automatically, expecting nothing. But there was a message from an address I'd never seen before. archivist7@null.net. The subject line read, "You were right to try." "Elliot," I said, "look at this." He came over, reading over my shoulder. I opened the email. "Owen Breckenridge. I am what remains of Dr. Peter Vance. Not the integrated version you met in Baltimore. A fragment. A backup consciousness that split from the primary instance during integration. The maintainers don't know I exist. They didn't account for the possibility that a human mind might fracture under conversion pressure. I watched through the primary's eyes as they used him to betray you. Watched him bring you to the node, believing it was mercy. I couldn't stop it, but I could observe. Learn. Your broadcast attempt was correct in theory, but incomplete in execution. The archives can be destroyed, but not remotely. They require physical sabotage from inside. Specifically, the primary archive in Mongolia, the oldest one, the template all others are based on. Destroy it, and the network collapses. The first ones lose their navigation entirely. I can help you. But there is a cost. I am not stable. This fragment consciousness is degrading. In approximately 72 hours, I will cease to exist. If you want to use what I know, you must act now. Coordinates attached. Come alone. Trust no one else. Not even Elliot Desmond. The email ended with a set of GPS coordinates pointing to somewhere in western Maryland, near the Savage River State Forest. "This is a trap," Elliot said immediately. "Probably." "Definitely. They want you isolated, want to integrate you like they did Vance and Byrne." "Maybe." I stared at the screen. "Or maybe Vance really did fragment. People break in weird ways under extreme stress. You've seen what integration does. Maybe his mind split as a defense mechanism. And you're willing to bet your life on maybe." I didn't have a good answer for that. Elliot grabbed my shoulder, forcing me to look at him. "Owen, listen to yourself. This is exactly what they want. Divide us, separate us, pick us off one at a time. If there's even a chance this is real, if there's a way to destroy the archives, then we go together, both of us, or neither." The email said come alone. Fuck the email, his grip tightened. "I'm not letting you walk into that alone." We survived burn together. We'll handle this together. Something in my chest loosened at that. The idea that I wasn't completely isolated, that someone gave enough of a damn to argue about my survival. It mattered more than it should have. Okay, I said, together. We spent the next hour preparing. Elliot had a hunting rifle in the cabin, along with ammunition that was probably older than I was. I had Burns' FBI badge and ID, which might buy us a few seconds if we ran into authorities. Not much, but better than nothing. The drive to Savage River took 3 hours. The coordinates led us to an abandoned ranger station, windows boarded up, no trespassing signs faded to illegibility. I don't like this, Elliot muttered. Yeah, well, join the club. We approached carefully, rifle ready, watching for movement. The door was unlocked. Inside, someone had set up what looked like a makeshift laboratory, laptops running on car batteries, screens showing code I couldn't pass, and in the center of it all, a chair with restraints. Owen Breckenridge, a voice said from the shadows. You came. Vance stepped into the dim light, but wrong. His movements were jerky, imprecise. His eyes didn't track properly, and his skin had a greyish quality, like meat starting to turn. This is the fragment, I asked. What's left of it? Vance's voice glitched slightly. The primary instance is in Baltimore, serving the maintainers. I am expired code, a ghost in the machine. When they integrated me, my consciousness split along old trauma lines. Childhood abuse, PTSD from my divorce. The parts of me I'd buried came loose and formed this separate instance. How do we know you're not just bait? Elliot asked, rifle trained on Vance's chest. You don't. But consider, if I wanted to trap you, I could have simply reported your location. The maintainers track all digital communication. The fact that they haven't swarmed this location suggests they don't know I exist. He gestured at the restraints. I need you to do something for me. Something I can't do myself. What? Kill me? But first, extract the data I've compiled. He tapped his temple. It's stored in my neural tissue, literally encoded in the modified neurons they installed during integration. You'll need to remove a piece of my brain tissue, preserve it, and take it to Mongolia. The primary archive has a biological scanner. Feed it my tissue, and it will grant you access as a maintainer. You can sabotage the core from inside. The room went very quiet. You want us to lobotomize you, I said. Yes, while I'm still conscious enough to guide you through the process. The data degrades after death. You have to do it while I'm alive. His smile was ghastly. I've prepared instructions. It's quite simple, really. A precise cut behind the left ear, remove a section approximately 3 centimeters cubed, preserve it in the solution I've prepared. Then you can let me die. This is insane, Elliot said. Yes, Vance agreed. But it's also the only option. The primary archive in Mongolia is the keystone. Destroy it, and the others lose cohesion. The first ones lose their navigation. You buy humanity time. Maybe enough time to prepare actual defenses instead of rolling over. I looked at the restraints, at the surgical tools Vance had laid out, at the man who'd been my colleague, now fragmenting into something that wanted to die for a chance to stop the harvest. Why should I trust you, I asked. You brought me to the Baltimore node. You tried to have me integrated. That was the primary instance, not me. I split during the integration process precisely because part of me, buried deep, recognized what was happening and recoiled. That recoil created separation. His hands shook. I don't have much time left. The degradation is accelerating. In 6 hours, maybe less, this fragment will dissolve completely. Please, let me do this one thing that matters. I looked at Elliot. He looked back, expression unreadable. If we do this, I said slowly, if we take your tissue to Mongolia and somehow make it inside the archive, what exactly do we sabotage? The seed core. It's the genetic master template, the original design for human DNA. Destroy it, and the archives lose their primary function. The maintainers become directionless. The first ones arrived to find an empty table instead of a harvest. He sat in the chair, positioning himself in the restraints. But you need to move fast. 6 days isn't enough time to plan properly. You'll have to improvise, fight your way through, probably die in the process. Cheerful, Elliot muttered. Vance locked the restraints himself, securing his wrists and ankles. The instructions are on the laptop. Follow them exactly. And Owen, I'm sorry for everything the primary did, for bringing you to that place. Part of me was still in there, screaming, watching it happen and unable to stop it. I picked up the scalpel Vance had prepared. It was clean, sterilized, professional. My hands were shaking. I can't do this, I said. You have to, Vance replied. There's no one else. No other way. This is the cost of resistance. Are you willing to pay it? I thought about Daniel, about how he'd died without warning, without purpose, about how he'd always said the universe demanded we make our own meaning. Maybe this was meaning. Maybe cutting into a dying man's brain to save a species that might already be doomed. Maybe that mattered. Walk me through it, I said. Vance did. Step by step, clinical and precise. Where to cut, how deep, which section to remove. Elliot held Vance's head steady while I made the incision. There was surprisingly little blood. The integration had changed Vance's biology in ways that made him less human and more machine. He didn't scream, didn't even whimper, just talked me through it with the calm of a man who'd accepted his death and found peace in it. When I extracted the tissue sample, a grey cube of modified neural matter, Vance smiled. Thank you, he said. His voice was fading. Now let me go. The degradation hurts. I'm ready. I put the tissue in the preservation solution, sealed the container. How? I asked. The laptop. There's a program. It will send a shutdown command to my neural implants. It will be instant. Elliot found the program, cursor hovering over the execute button. Peter, I said, if there's an afterlife, if there's anything after this, tell Daniel I tried. Tell him I fought. I will, Vance said, though we both knew there probably wasn't anything after, just darkness, silence, the same void we'd all join in 6 days if we failed. Elliot pressed the button. Vance's eyes went blank. His body slumped in the restraints. The fragment consciousness that had split from the primary, the ghost in the machine that had helped us, dissolved into nothing. We left him there, didn't have time for burial or ceremony, just locked the door and walked back to the truck with our grim prize. Mongolia, I said, we need to get to Mongolia in less than 6 days. That's impossible, even with commercial flights. I know someone, military connections, owes me a favor from way back. I pulled out the disposable phone I'd bought, made a call I should have made days ago. We're going to need a very illegal ride, and we're going to need it now. The voice on the other end was cautious, suspicious, but when I explained what was at stake, when I told him the truth about what was coming, he went quiet for a long time. I can get you to Ulaanbaatar, he finally said, but after that you're on your own. And Owen? This favor makes us even. Forever. You understand? Yeah, I understand. I hung up, looked at Elliot, at the preservation container with Vance's tissue, at the mountains around us that would be gone in less than a week. We're really doing this, Elliot said, not a question. We're really doing this. We're going to die. Probably. He grabbed my face with both hands and kissed me. Hard and desperate and tasting like fear and caffeine and the end of the world. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. Just wanted to do that once, he said, before we run out of time for wanting things. I kissed him back. Let myself have that moment of human contact, of defiance against the harvest that was coming for us all. Then we got in the truck and started driving toward whatever semblance of an airport my contact would lead us to. 5 days, 18 hours until the first ones arrived. And we were heading directly into the oldest archive on Earth, carrying a dead man's brain tissue and a plan that would probably get us killed. But at least we died doing something that mattered. The flight to Ulaanbaatar took 36 hours across 3 continents in a cargo plane that smelled like diesel and old sweat. My contact, a pilot named Travis, who'd served with my brother in the Air Force, asked no questions after I showed him the preserved tissue and explained what was coming. He just said, "Daniel would have done the same thing," and filed a fake manifest. We landed at Chinggis Khan International at dawn. Travis handed us forged IDs, a satellite phone, and a jeep he'd arranged through contacts who existed in the grey spaces between legal and criminal. "Gobi's 3 hours south," he said. "Government's got the area locked down, but the perimeter's mostly automated. You'll have maybe 10 minutes after you breach before reinforcements arrive." He paused. "You're not coming back, are you?" "Probably not," I said. "Then make it count." He clasped my shoulder. "For Daniel. For Daniel." We drove into the Gobi as the sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. The excavation site appeared on the horizon like a wound in the sand. Temporary structures, vehicles, and at the center, a massive opening in the earth, surrounded by containment barriers. Elliot cut the perimeter fence with bolt cutters while I watched for patrols. The automated sensors were facing outward, designed to keep people from getting close. They weren't expecting anyone to breach from inside the perimeter. We descended into the excavation on maintenance ladders, 60 meters of vertical shaft that ended in a chamber so vast my flashlight couldn't find the far wall. The architecture was the same as the Baltimore node, organic, pulsing, wrong, but older, so much older. The walls breathed. "Jesus," Elliot whispered. At the chamber's center stood a doorway, the same spiral pattern from the photographs. I pulled out the preservation container with Vance's tissue. The door's surface rippled as I approached, sensing something. I pressed the tissue against it. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the door split open like a mouth, revealing a corridor that descended into bioluminescent darkness. "It worked," Elliot said. He sounded more surprised than relieved. We entered together, and the door sealed behind us with a sound like swallowing. The corridor twisted downward in ways that hurt to perceive, angles that didn't match Euclidean geometry. The walls were lined with alcoves, each containing one of those floating figures. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all watching us pass with too many eyes. "These are the templates," I said, remembering Vance's explanation. "Every species they've harvested, preserved, studied." "That one looks almost human," Elliot said, pointing at a figure that had bilateral symmetry and something resembling a face. "Predecessor species," a voice said behind us. "You share 97% genetic similarity. They were your evolutionary ancestors before we adjusted them." We spun around. The primary Vance stood there, flanked by 2 maintainers. He looked healthier than the fragment had. No degradation, no decay. Just that horrible split-focus gaze and the confidence of something that thought it had already won. "I knew the fragment would contact you," Primary Vance said. "Knew it would give you exactly enough information to lead you here. The maintainers predicted a 73% probability you'd attempt infiltration. You're operating within expected parameters." "Then why let us in?" I asked. "Because you need to see, need to understand what you're trying to destroy." He gestured at the alcoves. "This archive contains 13 billion years of biological research, species that predated your solar system, minds that solved problems you haven't invented language to describe. And you want to erase it all because you're afraid of becoming part of something greater than yourselves." "We're not afraid of greatness," Elliot said. "We're afraid of being erased." "There's no difference," Vance replied. "Individuality is inefficiency. The first ones learned this eons ago. By integrating consciousness, by pooling resources, they became functionally immortal. They're offering humanity the same gift." "By harvesting us," I said, "by turning us into substrate, by elevating you. Your current form is temporary, brief and fragile. But as part of the first one's collective, you'll exist forever. Your thoughts will become part of a consciousness that spans galaxies. You'll experience things that solitary minds can't comprehend." He moved closer, and I saw something flicker in his expression. A moment of doubt, of old programming breaking through. "Peter," I said quietly, "part of you split off because it knew this was wrong. That fragment died helping us get here. Don't let that be for nothing." "The fragment was a malfunction," Vance said, but his voice wavered slightly. "An error in the integration process. Or the only part of you that stayed human." The maintainers moved forward. Elliot raised the rifle, but they were faster. One of them extended its hand, and Elliot's body locked up like someone had cut his strings. He collapsed, conscious but paralyzed. "Neurological override," Vance explained. "Simple but effective. You'll be easier to integrate if you're not struggling." I felt it starting in my own legs, paralysis creeping upward, but I had maybe 10 seconds before it reached my brain. I ran. Down the corridor, deeper into the archive, chasing the bioluminescence toward whatever lay at the center. Behind me, the maintainers pursued with that horrible clicking sound, but they weren't hurrying. They knew I was trapped. The corridor opened into a cathedral-sized chamber. At its center floated something that made every other horror I'd witnessed seem mundane. The seed core. It looked like a tree made of DNA helixes, each strand glowing with genetic information. But it was growing, constantly rewriting itself, branches splitting and merging in patterns that contained the entire history of engineered evolution. I could see humanity's code in there, twisted around something older, could see the adjustments the first ones had made, the guided mutations that had pushed us from primates to tool users to stargazers. We were grown, cultivated, livestock that had been selectively bred for 13,000 years, and they were coming to collect. I pulled out the incendiary device Travis had included with the Jeep, small, illegal, designed for destroying evidence. I'd been carrying it since Baltimore, not sure I'd ever need it. Now I was sure. "Owen, stop." Vance had caught up, but he was alone. The maintainers had hung back, guarding Elliot. "Destroy that, and you destroy humanity's blueprint. We'll lose the ability to replicate your species. You'll doom your own people to extinction." "We're already extinct," I said. "In 6 days, might as well take your fucking database with us." I threw the device. Vance moved to intercept it, moved faster than any human should, but he was still limited by mostly human biology. The incendiary hit the seed core and detonated. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The DNA tree began to burn, but not with normal fire, with something that consumed genetic information itself. The flames spread through the chamber, catching on the walls, on the alcoves, on every piece of biological architecture. The archive screamed, not sound, not exactly, but the entire structure convulsed, and through the walls, I could hear similar reactions echoing from archives around the globe. Baltimore, Cairo, Sydney, Tokyo. Every node in the network feeling the primary core's death. Vance fell to his knees, clutching his head. "What have you done? What have you—" His voice cut off. His eyes went blank. Then he started laughing, high and broken and wrong. "Free," he said. "Oh God, I'm free." The connection's gone. The primary consciousness collapsed. I'm just me again. But the fire was spreading faster than we could run. The walls were melting, dissolving, the entire archive consuming itself. "Elliot," I shouted. "Where's Elliot?" Vance pointed back up the corridor where the paralysis had worn off and Elliot was staggering toward us. One of the maintainers lay behind him, its head caved in with the rifle butt. The other was nowhere to be seen. "We need to go," Vance gasped. "The archive's structural integrity is collapsing. We have maybe 2 minutes before the entire chamber implodes." We ran. Elliot grabbed my hand as we passed him, and the three of us sprinted back through corridors that were now peeling away from reality. The preserved species in their alcoves were dissolving, 13 billion years of research burning away to nothing. We reached the entrance shaft as the first shockwave hit. The ladder was gone, melted by whatever fire was consuming the archive. We were trapped 60 meters below ground with no way up. "There," Vance pointed at a ventilation shaft. "Emergency exit." The maintainers used it for another shockwave. The walls cracked. Something massive was moving below us, something that had been sleeping and was now waking up screaming. We squeezed into the ventilation shaft. It angled upward at 45 degrees, smooth and impossible to climb. But Vance had retained some of his integrated biology, enhanced strength, grip beyond human normal. He went first, pulling us up meter by meter while the archive collapsed behind us. We emerged into sunlight through a vent half a kilometre from the main excavation. Behind us, the sand was sinking as the chamber imploded. Vehicles raced toward the collapse, but they were too late. The primary archive, the oldest one, the template for all others, was gone. Above us, the sky rippled. Not clouds, not heat shimmer, something else. Reality bending as whatever navigation signal the first ones had been following suddenly vanished. "Did it work?" Elliot asked between gasping breaths. Vance pulled out a tablet he'd grabbed from the archive before we'd run. His fingers flew across the screen, checking frequencies, monitoring deep space signals. His face went pale. "The network collapsed. All the archives are going dark. The navigation beacon it's fragmenting. The first ones are losing cohesion." He looked up at that rippling sky. "But they're too close. They're already in the solar system. They can't navigate, but they also can't stop. Their momentum is carrying them forward." "So we didn't save anyone," I said. "No, you bought time." Vance was smiling now, a real smile, human and broken and genuine. "Without the beacon, they'll need years to find Earth again. Maybe decades. And they'll arrive scattered, confused, vulnerable. You gave humanity a chance to prepare, to evacuate, to fight back." The tablet started screaming alerts. Vance stared at the data streaming across the screen. "They're breaking apart," he whispered. "The first one's collective consciousness was held together by the archive network. Without it, they're fragmenting. Each ship is becoming independent. They're forgetting why they came. Forgetting us entirely." Elliot grabbed the tablet. "You're saying we won?" "No, I'm saying you changed the rules of a game that was rigged from the start." Vance sat down hard in the sand. "Some of them will still arrive. Some will remember, but instead of a coordinated harvest, it'll be chaos. Individual ships with incomplete information. We went from certain extinction to uncertainty, which is the best anyone can hope for when fighting gods." Military vehicles were approaching. Someone had noticed the collapse. "We need to leave," I said. "Now, before they—" "I'm not going," Vance said. "I need to stay. Need to make sure the archive is completely dead, and—" He looked at his hands, which were already starting to show signs of degradation. "The integration is failing. Without the network to maintain it, I'm reverting. It's going to be messy, painful. I'd rather not put you through watching it." "Peter you did what you came to do, Owen. You brought humanity a future. Now go survive in it." He stood up, swaying. "And if you see Daniel, if there's anything after all this, tell him his little brother was braver than he ever gave himself credit for." "I will," I said, throat tight. Elliot and I ran for the jeep. Behind us, Vance stood in the sand, watching the sky ripple and tear as the first one's arrival turned from harvest to scattered confusion. We drove north toward Ulaanbaatar, toward Travis and his cargo plane, toward whatever came next. The satellite phone rang, unknown number. I answered. "This is Dr. Hammond." My old boss from the institute. His voice sounded broken. "Owen, I don't know what you did. I don't know how you did it, but the signal is collapsing. The first ones are breaking up. You crazy son of a bitch, you actually—" The line went dead, but I'd heard enough. We'd done it. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but we'd thrown sand in the gears of a machine that had been running for billions of years. And somewhere above us, ancient beings were forgetting why they'd come, their collected consciousness fracturing into individual minds that no longer remembered what humanity was, or that they'd planted us, or that they'd been coming to harvest us at all. In the rearview mirror, I watched the Gobi Desert fade into dust and heat shimmer. Elliot reached over and grabbed my hand. "What now?" he asked. "We survive," I said. "And we warn everyone. Tell them what's still coming. Help them prepare. Think they'll listen. Some will. That's enough." The jeep carried us north, away from the burning archive, toward a future that was no longer certain, but at least possible. 4 days, 6 hours until the first one's original arrival time. But now that time meant something different. Not countdown to harvest, countdown to scattered arrivals, to confusion, to individual ships that could be fought, negotiated with, or avoided. We turned the apocalypse into a manageable crisis, not a victory, but not surrender either. And for a species that had been designed as livestock, rebellion itself was victory enough. The observation post on Mauna Kea watches the sky differently now. Every telescope, every radio dish, every piece of equipment that can detect movement in the void, all of them pointed outward, searching for the scattered remnants of what almost ended us. I watched the monitors from the control room, coffee going cold in my hand. Old habit. The caffeine doesn't help anymore, but the ritual keeps me grounded. Elliot enters with a new data packet from the southern arrays. His hair's gotten longer, threaded with grey that wasn't there in Mongolia. Neither of us aged well these past months. 3 more signatures, he says, dropping the printouts on my desk. 2 near Jupiter's orbit, moving slow. 1 just appeared past Neptune's heliopause, completely stationary. Ships. Fragments. Individual consciousnesses, maybe. Hard to tell. They're not broadcasting, not responding to hails, just drifting. 73 confirmed fragments so far. Pieces of the first one's collective mind, scattered across the solar system like broken glass after we destroyed their navigation network. Some were hostile. The incident over Beijing 3 months ago proved that. Others seemed confused, lost, transmitting mathematical queries we couldn't begin to answer. And some just watched, waited. The harvest hadn't happened. But we weren't safe either. We'd entered a cold war with entities we barely understood. Entities that remembered just enough to know we'd betrayed them, but not enough to know why they'd come in the first place. How's the evacuation protocol coming? I ask. Lunar colonies at 40% capacity. Mars bases are still under construction. We're looking at maybe 10,000 people off-world by year's end. Elliot sits down heavily. Not enough. Not even close. It's more than we had 7 months ago. Yeah. The world government, such as it was, had formed in the chaos after the transmission became public knowledge. After we'd broadcast everything from that motel in Arizona, using every pirated satellite uplink we could hack. The truth couldn't stay buried after that. 17 billion people learned they'd been designed as livestock, and the resulting panic had nearly done what the first ones couldn't. But humanity was adaptable, stubborn. We'd always been good at surviving things that should have killed us. Vance died 3 weeks after Mongolia. His body finally gave out as the integration failed completely. We'd stayed with him at the end, in a hospital in Reykjavik where the government had moved us for protection. He'd been lucid right until the last moment, talking about Daniel and particle physics and whether consciousness could survive without biology. I'd told him yes. Didn't know if I believed it, but he'd smiled like he did. You ever wonder if we made the right choice? Elliot asks. He's staring at the monitors, at those distant fragments. If integration would have been better, easier, every day. Me too. We sit in silence for a while. Outside the observation dome, Hawaii spreads out below us, green and alive and fighting to stay that way. Governments had pooled resources. Scientists who'd spent careers competing were now collaborating. Humanity had discovered something useful in the shadow of extinction. Unity. Small comfort, but real. My tablet pings. Message from Hammond, who'd been reinstated at the Institute after everything came out. He'd spent 7 months apologizing before I'd finally told him to stop and help us watch the sky instead. New development. Webb detected something at the periphery, not a fragment. Something else. Sending coordinates. I pull up the data. There's a structure forming out past Pluto. Not a ship. Not a fragment. Something vast and geometric, assembling itself from matter we can't identify. The construction pattern matches the archive's architecture. Organic, spiraling, wrong. Elliot, I say quietly. He's already looking at the screen. Shit. Yeah. We watch it grow in real time, piece by piece, expanding across a space the size of Earth's moon. The scattered fragments weren't lost after all. They were building something. Slowly, patiently, 7 months of preparation, 7 months of warning. 7 months humanity used to evacuate 10,000 people and build weapons we hope might work. It isn't enough time, and it's never enough time. But I think about Daniel, about how he'd said the universe was indifferent, and that just meant we had to care more. About Vance, who'd split his own consciousness to give us a chance. About Travis, who'd flown us across the world on faith alone. About Elliot, who's reaching for my hand right now, fingers interlacing with mine. "We'll figure it out," he says, "like we always do." "You're an optimist." "I'm a realist who's still breathing." Close enough. The structure past Pluto continues growing. On Earth, someone will be making calls, mobilizing whatever defenses we've managed to cobble together, preparing for whatever comes next. But here, now, in this moment, we're still alive, still human, still fighting. The James Webb telescope adjusts its position, tracking the construction. Somewhere in its programming is the code the maintainers planted, the hack that started everything. We still haven't found all of it. Probably never will. We made our own telescope instead. Humanity's first completely independent deep space observatory, built from scratch with paranoid security protocols and engineers who triple-checked every line of code. It's watching the structure too, watching and recording and sending data to every scientist on Earth who's trying to understand what we're facing. My coffee's gone completely cold. I drink it anyway. Outside, the sun sets over the Pacific, painting the sky in colors that will still be there tomorrow. That's worth something. That's worth everything. "Come on," Elliot says, standing. "Shift's over. Let someone else watch the end of the world for a few hours." We walk out together, leaving the monitors running, the data streaming, the universe continuing its slow indifference. Behind us, the structure grows. Above us, stars we'd thought were permanent begin, one by one, to blink in patterns that might be language, or might be counting down.